Hello and welcome to the first edition of the College Football UK podcast. I am your host for the day, Fletch. You will know me from the Sleep At Network in a variety of different formats, mainly the Sleep at Work podcast. Before we get started, just going to introduce you to my two absolutely stunning co-hosts today. And hopefully there will be a third to join us along the way. We have Sam. I'm going to go in order of where I see you on the screen, not in order of anything else. So we have Sam, who you will hopefully know as the quarterback for Hurdle the Line on the Sleep at Work network. We have Gary, who is one of the hosts on the NFL Around the UK on the Let's Talk Sports network. And both of them, thankfully, already know each other through another podcast and things going on the Let's Talk Sports network with an NFC West podcast. First of all, before we get going on anything else, guys, how are you both on this wonderful evening?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, glad to be starting up another podcast. People are going to get sick of hearing my voice at some point, but I don't care.
Don't care. Absolutely the same as Sam, and looking forward to this. It's passionate of ours, and as we talked about, it's great to kind of get a bunch of us together to talk about this sort of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to delving into this.
Yeah, I mean, look, on both sides, both of you, I don't think anyone can ever get sick of either of you. So
I'll record that and ask the wife later.
Oh, guys, I can put that in a clip for you, but we can release that one put that one on the socials as well. So it's a good start because I think all three of us our paths have crossed in various different ways over the years. Just before we do get started, this fully started and fully into it, this is a college football podcast. This is part of the Sleep at Work network where we do a host of American football-based podcasts, and we'll do a host more. But with it being college football and with having another American football, this week, if you are listening on the week of the release of this episode, you will note that it is NFL draft week. The main week of the year where both the college football world and the NFL world meet for what is one of the biggest events of the year in American football. We will be hosting a live Twitter space from around 11:30 p.m. on NFC on draft night. That'd be GMT, so that'd be 6:30 in the evening Eastern. And I can't be bothered to learn any other time zones at this moment in time to know what the other ones are. If you are in the States, you know, based on Eastern time, what that would be for you. So feel free to join us. UK fans will generally be prioritised for microphones, but feel free to join us on the night and listen to a load of us from across the pond talk draft as it's happening. But I thought what we do for today's episode, and with Gary and Sam, and hopefully again we will have someone joining us later on. If not, we will have we can introduce them at a later date. Just introduce yourselves really quickly. We'll give you 60 to 90 seconds. Tell us, we'll go with Sam first. Who's your college team? Why did you choose that college team? And yeah, we'll go from there. And then Gary, if you go after Sam.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Sam. I'm a massive LA Rams fan, and when sort of choosing and sort of deciding when I started getting into college football and deciding my college team, most people probably would have thought, oh, well, maybe he'll go with an LA, California team, someone who's going to be near with the Rams, who knows. And it's like, yeah, that could have been the easy way out. It could have been the cop out. But actually, me and one of my friends who I'm very close with, he was actually a Longhorns fan a long time before I was. And I started to sort of understand college football by being with him. And it just felt natural that, well, I'm watching the Longhorns play. I'm watching, their games. Why not just support them? And it sort of developed on the fact that I quite liked Sam Ellinger at the time, who was the quarterback. Obviously, a shame he hasn't really worked out in the NFL. and also watching Bijan Robinson, who I still love watching to this day, and I'm happy that I've seen him live. So yeah, it's only been maybe sort of 2-3 years that I've been into college football. So I'm still learning, still sort of developing my knowledge of college football, and hopefully we can all learn along the way.
Yeah,
It's kind of the plan, isn't it?
Gary.
It's kind of the plan. So mine's a different story. So way back when I was just a whippersnapper youngster, I was about 17, 18. I was playing football at a pretty high level in the UK, and the team I was playing for, full contact team, actually had a year's scholarship swap available for certain members if you were good enough, etc. And I was selected to go 1 year. The following season, I was selected to go and do a year at FSU, which was the team that was sponsoring. And unfortunately, sliding doors moment in my life, they pulled that scholarship just funding way back when. As I say, this was back in the early 90s or something like that, 80. Yeah, so it would have been early 90s. So money and whatever else recalculations, and they cancelled that. So it never came to fruition. But obviously, from that point forward, I was an FSU fan, and I was going to be following them, supporting them. I must admit, life got in the way for a good few years, and not just NFL, but college football went by the wayside. And now I've obviously come back into it in the last 10 years or so and started to pick things back up and start to follow it a lot bit more closely. But yeah, much like Sam, I'm a massive sort of Californian team fan, and NFC West, as we just mentioned. So I'm a 49ers fan. So I've got totally opposite ends of the states. I've got Florida on one side and California on the other. So I can never quite understand how I manage that, but that's the situation. But as you know, as UK fans, once you've chosen your team, you chose your team. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. And just to kind of introduce myself, most people will know me as a Lions fan, but what you don't know is I am incredibly lazy. So Michigan, I went with Michigan. They are local, they are close. That's it. If I ever want to go on an ultimate football trip, I don't have to go very far. If I go to Detroit, I can go half an hour over to Ann Arbor and I can complete the full thing. However, what I've kind of started to do over the last 12 months or so is I found a bit of an affinity for the University of North Carolina. Now, I am not a two-team person in any way, shape, or form. However, one of my closest friends from the world of the Detroit Lions, who I spend a lot of time with on the internet, because that's the way we are today. But we are good friends and have been for over a year. His wife is a professor at the University of North Carolina. So I have been invited, not been yet because I can't get over, but I've been invited, and we will hopefully get to go to a University of North Carolina game. But because of that little affiliation, I have found myself watching a lot of University of North Carolina.
Doesn't
You
hurt
wouldn't
from your
notice
point of
it.
view. They wear blue as well, so they
Oh
wear a
yeah, I was going
similar
to say
blue.
as well that color blue as well. I'm a Manchester City fan, so that color blue is very, very easy for me to get in touch with.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you wouldn't necessarily notice that I've got a genuine affinity for UNC. However, my Drake May propaganda might give it away a little bit that I've been dropping over
Banging
the
the
last
drum,
few weeks.
banging the drum for Mr. May.
So one thing we find is, and as you were saying there a second ago, Gary, is like, look, life gets in the way sometimes. We follow a sport that's not. We've said this many times. The reason this network is called the Asleep at Work Network is because of the pain that we must go through in order to follow this sport. Life does get in the way, unfortunately, for many of us. We have great access to the NFL, but we don't have the greatest access to college. And many of us are just passionate about this sport. We want to get to know a bit more about college. And we don't want to treat anybody like they don't know anything about college football. But this is essentially a introduction to college football episode. None of us are the most knowledgeable on college football, but we all watch it. We're all passionate about it. We all love it. So we're going to do, like I say, just a bit of an introduction to college football, see where we're at. And to get us started and just to kind of really welcome us into this, when I was doing a bit of research before, I know Michigan kind of well, I guess. And I know we all know our teams, but I want to see how well you know college football as a whole. And I know we've all said maybe not the greatest knowledge on it. So to get ourselves started,
quiz.
can you tell me roughly what year the first college football game was believed to have been played?
I think it was about 1895.
Yeah, I'd have gone around 1889.
So it was Rutgers and somebody, wasn't it? I'm sure it was Rutgers. And it was an Ivy League team. I'm sure I can't remember which one.
Rutgers is one
Princeton?
of the teams. Rutgers and Princeton. Well done.
Yes.
However, you're about 30 years out. It's believed to have been 1869 that the first college football game was to have been played. Now,
Wow.
that has not been. That is the belief. That is the commonly held belief, but that is not we cannot prove that for a fact at this moment in time. However, that is the commonly held belief that the first college football game was 1869 between, as you. And I'm very, very impressed with Rutgers versus Princeton there. So
It just shows you, I suppose, it just shows that the college game has been around for so long. So much longer than, I think a lot of the UK fans probably have no idea. They just think college is always sort of like a breeding ground, the academy for, the NFL. And I suppose that's a way that most of the UK would look at it from a UK sporting perspective. But to actually realise it's been that long and that old, and it's been set up for almost 100 years before the NFL as we know it.
Yeah.
That's mental. That is absolutely mental.
Yeah. And this is something we will get into as well at some point in this episode, is that history and that tradition. Because what we will all find is, as you first get into college football, is in many senses, it's bigger than the NFL. In so many senses, it's even bigger than, and it's a struggle for us to kind of, I guess, realize that sometimes, coming from the way our sports work and how, when we look at, we all like your European football. I say that in air quotation marks, but we all like our football, and we're used to the way that our academies work and all that sort of stuff, and how players progress through to the main teams. That it's such a shock to realize just how kind of the academy, again in air quotation marks, academies for NFL teams bigger than the NFL teams in many senses. But we'll start with college football has been going since roughly 1869. There is not a huge amount of information that's worth mentioning right now on this episode without going way too deep into it. But the next thing you kind of need to know is that the NCAA is the governing body for collegiate athletics in the United States of America. Every college has a full athletic program that many of us will know from college basketball, baseball,
women's football,
but they also
hockey,
have
lacrosse.
Yeah.
You name it, any sport that you can think of, there's a scholarship, and it's part of the NCAA.
Yeah, and gymnastics as well. Every school has an athletics program that competes against other schools, and it all falls under the NCAA, which is a term you will have more than likely heard before. Now, the football side of it seems to operate, or in many ways feels like it does operate slightly differently than other athletic programs within it, because as we've mentioned before in our little group chat, football is king. Football brings all the money in. Football it pays for a lot of the other athletic programs to exist. So football is split into 3 divisions, quite simply. Divisions 1, Division 2, Division 3. That's nice and easy. The Division 1 is split into the FBS and the FCS, which is the Football Bowl subdivision and the Football Championship subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one. Which the FBS is typically made up of the bigger schools, basically. Then the FBS, most of us will know schools from the FBS, not too many FCS schools. So what we'll end up talking about most is FBS. And then
they are the
that
big
is
ones,
then split
aren't they?
into, that is then split into 11 conferences. So I kind of warned you that I might do this. How many of those conferences can you remember off the top of your head? And I will give you the points if you can at least get the Power 5.
I mean, I can name. I might not be able to name them exactly what they are, but I'm going to take a guess at a few of them. There's obviously start off with I know SEC, which is the
Yep.
Southern Eastern
Southeastern
Conference.
Conference,
Southeastern
SEC.
Conference.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
the Big 12.
hmm
No,
Yep.
sorry, Big 10, and
Yeah.
the one that starts with 12, even though it's no longer 12 teams in it. It's the
Pac-12.
Pac-12. That's it.
Pac-12.
The one is it the AAC and also the ACC? They're two.
ACC is the Big Five.
Yes.
Yeah,
ACC is the Power Five.
yeah.
AAC is one of the smaller FCS conferences.
There's the
So-
independents, obviously,
Yes.
which we'll come on
So I
to.
believe you've already hit all of the traditional Power 5, which again we'll get onto in a second, but you've got all of them already. There's a couple more, but you've got all of them.
There's the Sun Belt Conference.
Sun
There's
Belt
the
Conference,
Americas Conference. There's the
American Athletic
Midwestern
Conference, yeah.
Conference. There's the Mountain West. Is it Mountain West Conference or is it just the Mountain State?
Mountain West, yeah.
Mountain West, that's the one. Yeah.
Mountain West.
There's the then
Is
there's
there
the
Mid-American or something like that?
Mid-American, yes.
Yeah. MAC.
also,
I just remember it from MAC.
there's the Ivy League one as well, which is a weird one, which is a very specific conference just for the Ivy League schools that don't actually play football in any sort of sense, but they still have their own conference because it's one of the oldest ones. There's also like an Eastern Conference or something, but it's not top level. It's we're doing all right there.
To go
Actually,
through
we
all
did
of
not
them,
bad.
I think you've got all of them. Maybe one of
We
them
hit on
is
most
missing.
of them. We might have missed
One. I think you're
one of the-
missing one.
I think we missed an Atlantic one or one of the ones
I
out.
I did mention the ACC, which is the Atlantic one.
Yeah,
Atlantic.
And then
Conference.
there's the American
A-
Athletic one, which is the
AAC.
big one.
I think there's one out California.
Is there one just called Conference?
The conference?
Correct. There we go.
There it
Conference
is. It's
USA.
the conference. There he is.
Conference
there
USA.
It is.
Conference USA.
It was a very sort of obvious one for some reason. What should we do? Like conference.
Conference. Should we call ourselves conference? All right then.
And that is not the newest conference, the second newest conference that started in the 90s. But you've got the as we mentioned, just go through all of them again. You've got the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. You've got the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Big 12, the Big 10, Conference USA, Division 1 FBS Independents, the Mid-American Conference, the Mountain West Conference, Pac-12, Southeastern Conference, better known as the SEC, and the Sun Belt Conference, the SBC. So I think, if I'm right, that you've got all of them.
We finally, I think we nailed all of that. Yeah, I'd be quite happy.
I'm
quite
pretty
happy.
sure.
As a group, I think we've got all 11 there.
I'd say I believe between the both of you, you've definitely got all 11 there. If anybody who is listening wants to go back and ratify that for us for with an independent adjudication,
I'm sure somebody will be out there be going, "No, you
it.
never mentioned this one."
I'm gonna say it's either that or someone's going, "I'm not doing your work for you, bugger off."
It's your job.
Yeah. So as we mentioned as well, these are split into there's 5 particular conferences that we consider or traditionally have considered the Power 5. That would be the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the SEC. Those are made up of, again, the FBS is the bigger schools. These are the bigger schools across the country. And all 3 of us follow a team that is at least within the traditional Power 5. And one thing we were talking about the other day was that most of these conferences aren't random. They haven't just been randomly made. A lot of these have existed since the late 1800s, early 1900s, and all of them are based on geographical location.
You can tell by the name, almost, can't you? I mean, Atlantic Coast Conference, you're pretty much guaranteed that most of them are going to sit Florida, Southeast Coast, North Carolina, all along the Atlantic Coast. That's where you'll find most of the ACC.
Yeah, and again, the Southeastern Conference, all schools are in the southeast of the US. The
The Mountain West is going to
Mountain
be
West,
sort of those sort
that
of
Appalachian, the Rockies, and all
Rockies, yeah,
that,
element.
That's it. Then you've got the Pac-12, which obviously people forget that Pac means the Pacific. Originally, that's where that kind of started off. So
Yeah.
a lot of those colleges were in the Pacific side.
Mid-American, you could probably guess, it's probably in the middle of America.
You'd think so, right?
Ish.
Some of it gets a bit. The Big Ten is obviously an interesting one because that's around the lakes a lot of the time. It's up north, a bit around the lakes and stuff, isn't it? So why it's called that, I don't really know. But most of the states are big. Maybe, who knows?
I'm going to assume it's probably because at the time it was probably. I mean, that's one of the older ones, isn't it? It's probably they were the original, so they called it the Big Ten.
I think it was the Big Six
original 10 or whatever they call them. Yeah.
It is officially, the Big Ten is officially the oldest conference still going.
Yeah,
in
continuously.
The fact that it was 1896. I say, not looking at my computer screen. And
honest God, that's where I saw 1896. That's when the Big Six was formed, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. So the Big Ten has been going since 1896. Now, what you would idea? Now, if I was to ask you, gentlemen, the Big Ten, what would you assume? How many teams would you assume were in the Big Ten, or the Pac-12, or the Big 12?
Well, originally it would have been 10, 12, and 12.
10, 12, and 12, right? You would have thought.
It would have been. It would have been. But are that many teams in those divisions now? Or conferences now? No.
Definitely not.
Which is something we'll get onto in a bit.
Yes.
But those, like I say, most of those conferences have some sort of nail on the head moment to nail on the head of it's a pretty simple I say Southeastern Conference, the schools in the Southeast. The Big Ten, there's 10 schools in there. The Big 12, there's 12. So then the conferences, they will mostly play each other. You will mostly play interconference games, but you will also play the odd intra-conference game. These are, if I'm right, they are decided a good few years in advance who you will play.
Oh, yeah, you can go and find your college schedules for the next 2-3 years out there that they know. Well, you could prior to this year. You could.
Prior to this year,
you could look ahead. You could look ahead quite a long way. I mean, I can guarantee you that I know that on the 30th of November is rivalry weekend, and therefore Florida is playing Florida State. So I know that already. The year after that, I can't find that right now, and we'll probably touch on that going forward.
Again, but that's going to go along the lines of how many teams are in the Big 10 and the Big 12. That's it. We're going to get on that.
How many teams are still in the Pac-12?
One of those two numbers is still correct, though. Out of the in the number 12, one of the two numbers is correct. But in that, you get to the end of the season. There's 13 games in a season for the vast majority of teams. At the end of that, you will either, if you are in the FBS, you will be lucky to either play in the college football playoffs or in a bowl game. And I know we've all heard of bowl games. Some of the most common being the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, ones that we've heard of
Orange Bowl.
quite a lot of times. Yeah, so bowl games you will be invited to. They are usually between two teams from separate conferences, and there are about 100, all of which are sponsored by a variety of different companies. Just going to throw this one out there to you both, because I'm always interested to know which one's the most interesting one you've seen lately, over the last few years. Or can you think of any of them that have been sponsored? Because I know there's like the Reese's Pieces Bowl.
The Reese's, there was a weird one last year that I saw, and I was like, how can it be sponsored by? It was sponsored by like a petrol company, or there was I'm sure there used to be like a Sunny Delight Bowl. It's probably not called that now, but there used to be some soft drinks and stuff like that. There's all sorts.
There was a Camping World Bowl. I found that funny.
Yeah.
A Camping World Bowl.
I'm sure there's a Lowe's sort of home improvement bowl or something like that. There's probably a Target bowl, and there's no doubt a Walmart bowl. And any big sort of company you can just imagine will have a Verizon bowl and all those.
The famous Idaho Potato Bowl.
Of which we have found out a very interesting statistic about through Hurdle the Line. That was it. Josh Allen was the MVP of the Idaho Potato Bowl.
He was.
which is a statistic that we apparently, by the way, that we found out that's don't half impress the ladies, that stat. Apparently.
Mm-mm.
So the most common being the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Cotton Bowl Classic, the Peach Bowl, and the Fiesta Bowl. But as you've seen there, there are a number of there are lots of bowls nowadays. It is like
I think if you
IKEA,
get a winning schedule, you get a bowl game. It's pretty much
yeah.
how
And like
it
say,
goes. You know, if
there are 100. There's over 100 college football teams as well. So the amount of bowl games that you have is there's only so many companies you can go through before that will sponsor a bowl game before you start to get some strange bowl games and bowl game names. If you are a bit luckier, you will get invited to, like I say, to play in the college football playoffs, which is officially a separate thing, but you will invited to. Which up until this year has been 4 teams, and you are invited to play in the
decided
college
by a
football
committee.
playoffs. The invitations are decided by a committee, which, if you like internet discourse around football, when the committee decides the 4 teams to play in the college football playoffs, the internet discourse is fantastic.
Especially if your team's gone unbeaten that season.
Yeah, there was a bit of a meltdown this year, wasn't there, from certain fan groups? I think people weren't happy we got in for a start.
Certainly, there was a discussion.
There was an argument to say that we shouldn't have got in there, but I think we were playing. We were light years above everyone else in our division. That's why.
Yeah, and the argument then was the strength of schedule comes into, and as we talked about there, Fletch, as you mentioned, the interconference games count for a lot more in deciding the top 4 rankings. So even though, your team, FSU this year went 13-0, unbeaten, didn't lose a game, but the strength of schedule as decided upon by, and this is where it gets really confusing, because the strength of schedule and the standings in college football are decided upon by a bunch of press writers and some people. So they decide who the top sort of 25 teams are. So if your team doesn't happen to play any of those, your scoring in your conference score is weighted less than if you're playing those top 25. So, and again, as I say, that's decided upon by a bunch of press writers and sports writers. So it's all very convoluted. It's not like the NFL where it's like, strength of schedule. There's no strength of schedule. It's like if you win, you win, and if you don't, you don't. It doesn't matter. The college has so many nuances and stuff. So that was some of the furore this year, because FSU 13-0 went unbeaten, didn't go to the college championships. Teams with more losses on their records did, as you say, Sam. You got put in there, and then the hoo-ha around why that decision was made, which was around the fact that the QB for the FSU team got injured, and therefore the team was less, and therefore didn't deserve to go in because the QB was injured. But then that QB didn't get voted in the Heisman, so he obviously wasn't that important. Anyway, don't get me started on that one. I could go right down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. But it really is. The internet discourse around it's fantastic, but it's the problem with having a 4-team playoff with 100 or so teams to decide from is, okay, some of them they're not getting. Some of them are quite obvious. Your teams that go 1-12, no, they're not going to get into the playoffs. But there are that many teams with a winning record, and there are a few teams that have that go unbeaten. There are a few teams that have maybe only 1 loss. But like I say, it goes down to somebody's opinion on how strong your schedule was. And it comes down to a lot of opinion, and the opinions of a load of people sat around a table who don't play football. It's which again, this is why it's important. I think it's important to do this, is because we need to know where college football has come from. But a lot of this is changing. Then you go on to, and this is where I think one of the most interesting conversations can come from today, is the winner of the college football. Well, the winner of the college football playoffs becomes national champion. which right now is your Michigan Wolverines.
The
Um,
Michigan.
which we'll get the controversy is for another episode for that one. But there was
It's a
controversy.
whole,
There was
it's a
controversy
whole
over that one.
episode. That's a whole episode on that one.
But one thing we spoke about is the history of this game and how college football has been a mainstay in so many households across the country. Some of the college football fans, you could argue, are even more passionate about the game than many NFL
Fanatical,
fans.
I would say. Fanatical about
Absolutely.
it.
The multiple of the college football stadiums are up there with the biggest in the world, and they regularly sell out. Colleges are within families' bloodlines. Colleges are it's an extremely big thing, and the history that is behind it, the rivalries that we have, and the whole experience around college football is one that is something that completely different to what we know and what we get used to with the NFL.
It's one of the
I just want
reasons
to
the
throw
NFL. I just want to throw this one. Do you know this? I don't know if you're aware, but the NFL is not allowed to play Saturday games when college football is in season. The only time that the end of the the middle of the NFL season there was a few Saturday games. That's because the college games had finished. The NFL can't touch Saturdays.
Yeah,
That's how important. That's how big college football is.
And just to show you some of the just as an example, like Auburn University, who play at the, I think it either is or was called the Jordan Hare Stadium. I think it still is. Holds 88,000 people. That's more than I think of the people that actually live there. That's also a state that doesn't have a NFL team. Yet they still can manage to pull 88,000 people. It's always full. They always.
I think it was full on spring play. I think it was full for their spring game just this week, where it was their team playing their own team. It was like the first spring game where the offense plays the defense. I think they had 88,000 Auburn fans just watching that. It's like that's just insane. So for reference, I suppose, so that UK fans get that. That's like 88,000 people turning up to watch, let's say, Everton Academy play Everton Academy.
Yeah, it is. It's like you know what? It's like watching the Leeds University versus Leeds Metropolitan University varsity. That level.
Yeah.
For 88,000 people. That's basically filling Wembley. That's just
for a
utterly
warm-up,
crazy.
For a warm-up training game. It's like that's how massive that's. And as you say, as you say, Fletch, it's in the family because Granddad went to Michigan, Dad went to Michigan, son goes to Michigan. You support Michigan, even if you're not a footballer or an athlete. Your whole family is a Michigan family, and it's a family thing, and therefore you support it and you donate to it, and it just perpetuates out.
And I think that's one thing that's important to understand. I think coming from, again, our perspective is a lot of us played the sport when we grow up of football, say, but I play for my local 5-a-side team. I played for my local 7-a-side team. Some of us are lucky enough, and everyone has a story about how they were good enough at one point until they hurt their knee. I also have that story. We all were. But there is the very common thing of like the teams are, like I say, based on a actual college. It's not called college football because it used to be. These are still colleges. These are where like people go to study law, people go to study art, people go to study this, people go to study that. You are part of that university. That university is part of you. So the ownership that you actually genuinely 100% rightfully feel over that team is not the same as supporting your local football team. That's something that you were part of. That's yours.
Yeah, you've gone there. You've put the effort in. You've been you've been a member of that alumni for 3-4 years, so you feel part of it. So you've got the T-shirt. you've got the sweatshirt, and I'm saying that with a slightly tongue in cheek because we've all seen the Letterman jackets and we've all seen the sweatshirts with the University of Ohio and whatever else on. But yeah, people have got that, and I know loads of American friends who all get together on college days and they all dress up, and they even though they've out of college for 30 years, it doesn't matter. They still call themselves the college nicknames, a Longhorn or a Husky or whatever. They're still a Wolverine. They're still a Seminole. They're still that 30 years later, because that's important to them, and that's how it is. It's not like it's impossible, I think, for the UK fans to really grasp that importance to the American culture. It's something very odd and very unique.
And the thing is, you also get a lot of people who, obviously, kids coming through high school and going into college and choosing their college team, which obviously will, again, another whole topic we can go off on.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them will go to colleges that their parents went to. And so, like, I use Dylan Raiola as an example, who's just joined the university. What university has he just joined? That's really going to bug me now. He's just joined the same university that his dad went to, which for the life of me I cannot think of the name of it. But it's the fact that his dad went there. He made his name there. He went. Where was it? Sorry,
Cornhuskers.
Nebraska?
Yeah, Nebraska Cornhuskers. So the fact that his dad, like he was originally meant to be playing for Georgia, like he'd committed to Georgia, but he then switched
Then
beforehand.
Nebraska came along and said, "Come play over here."
And there was that link with his dad. Obviously, his dad went on to be quite successful for the Lions, and we now have someone who's coming through who's decided to go to a college based upon the fact that his dad went there. And I mean, you even look today, I mean, obviously to help some people who are maybe might have seen some of the more famous players who have been out there, the likes of Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce, will still go around wearing their Cincinnati college, university college stuff. Like when they go to the game, I mean, you always see them in their Cincinnati stuff. So I mean, the fact that that's still a massive part of their lives, even 20, 30 years down the line, it's still going to be part of them, and it does become sort of almost like tradition that you go to certain schools because your family went there.
Yeah,
and have you ever seen the movie Blindside?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just going to say that's he wanted to go there because his dad went there, and the family was that family came from. What was it? Was it Michigan? Was it Michigan? No, Washington.
It was
Washington.
It was in the South.
Oh, it's gonna. That's quickly. Blindside. Where did he play? Left tackle. University of. I thought it was Georgia or something. I just remember because there was a whole hoo-ha about why he wanted to go there, and they thought he was being tapped up and whatnot. But
was it? Hang on, because it was based in the South. So I think
based in Georgia,
one of them.
Alabama. Oh, was he not Roll Tide? Was he not a Crimson Tide? Did he not go Alabama? Digress now.
Should really know, to be honest.
We should.
Yeah,
no,
really
you just threw that in there, and that's one of those ones.
University of Mississippi.
Oh, he's in Mississippi.
That's the one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ole Miss.
University of Mississippi.
Ole Miss. Of course it was. Yeah, but I think he was slated. Everyone was like, "Well, you've got to go Alabama. You've got to go somewhere else." And he's like, "No, I'm going to go Ole Miss." And they were like, "Oh, that's because of you've been tapped up and whatever else." It's like, no, it's because
because I think wasn't the people who adopt him. I don't go into too much.
We don't even go into that. Let's leave that one.
They essentially they weren't there. They were massive supporters, and
they'd been they graduated from Ole Miss, and
but didn't
she
they
was
also
a cheerleader or something? And
didn't they also still have some sort of link to funding at Ole Miss as well?
Yeah,
there was something to do with that link to funding. I think that's where they all thought the whole tapping up came from.
And that's an interesting, I know we've kind of looped around to it, but the funding aspect is so important to college, and people who have gone to Michigan or have been to FSU or to Texas, whatever else, and have gone on to be successful in business and successful everywhere else, they will donate some of their money back to their college alumni. Just, I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're obviously on a mailing list and they get pinged every year going, help us continue being the college that you love. And so, the colleges make an absolute fortune from their donors,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
historically, and I'm going to say this carefully now, Fletch, historically has gone back to the colleges. So the colleges have been the mainstay and the holders of all the money, and in some ways have exploited the athletes in a way that they can make more money. Now, obviously, the reason I'm kind of saying this in a very political way is that's also changing and has also been quite an upheaval, because there was, a lot of the athletes thought that they were being exploited and used, and in effect, they have been, and it's been proven in US law that, that's been illegal, and what the colleges have done isn't allowed anymore, and that's also changing. So, I'm trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, Fletch, but it's so easy to just start rumbling on with this.
No, yeah. So, obviously, we'll start to head there, because every now and again we'll say something when we're already starting to try. We keep having to roll ourselves back, or we'll be careful.
Wait for it. Let's start with the Pac-12. Let's go there.
But let me. I'm going to ask you a quick question then, so we can, I guess, kind of jump ahead a little bit and start going. As far as rivalries go, now college football, one thing that's amazing is the rivalries. It is the closest thing you will get in the States to kind of our football rivalries,
derby games,
and in derby games. So, as a Michigan fan, Ohio State and Michigan State, but mainly for me in terms of kind of size of game, it's Ohio State. That is a huge, huge game. I have a friend who was lucky, and I was not lucky enough to go and do this, but I know a friend who was lucky enough to go over and watch that game get played in Ann Arbor. And it was the one a couple of years ago where I think there was an issue early in the game, and it all spilled over into half time, into behind the scenes, and they were not quite fights, but they were handbags thrown.
Yes.
And a lot of drama, because that's players who've been there for 2-3 years, and then you go. But that feeling still remains somehow with fans.
And the antagonism in the stands as well, as we've just mentioned.
Yeah,
because the people who go and watch these games are college people. If you remember as a UK person, you remember when you were at uni, if all of your university turned out on a Saturday, for example, let's say you went to Portsmouth Uni, and on Saturday you were playing Southampton University, and everybody from your university turned out to watch them, and everyone from that university turned out. That's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
Plus all the people who went to Portsmouth, and plus all the people who ever went to Southampton, they're all coming in. They're all flying in for this one game. It's enormous. It's so fever pitched as well.
Yeah.
Some of them, it's immense.
So, look, every college team has, because they've been going for so long, has multiple rivalries. If we were to go into every college team's rivalry, we'd be here for a few years. Not necessarily. So, just for you two, Texas Longhorns and the FSU Seminoles, who are your main rivals? Who are the rivals that you guys play?
So our biggest rivals obviously is the Oklahoma Sooners, who we have played against for now 124 years. This will be the 124th year. So obviously 2025 is going to be a massive, massive game. The Red River rivalry there's a lot that, it's a massive sort of rivalry that's based all the way back to the 1900s around political issues, the issues between Oklahoma State and Texas State. They massively hate each other in terms of just as statesly people from Texans don't like people from Oklahoma. And this all sort of developed ahead in 1931 when you had the Red River Bridge War. I won't go into too much about the actual bridge war, but essentially they fought over a free toll bridge over the Red River. And basically, this has then spilled into the college game. And like I say, it's been going since 1900. The game is played at the Cotton Bowl, which is in Dallas. So that is halfway between where the Oklahoma Sooners, Oklahoma University is, and Texas University in Austin. And it is played every year on the second Saturday in October. So for this year, it's going to be the October the 11th. Next year, it'll be October 12th, etc., etc. And it has been that since 1939, I believe.
Hmm.
But anyone who's a Texas Longhorns fan who's listening, if you want to correct me on that, you're free to do so. You probably know more than I will.
But do it nicely.
Yeah.
Please.
And what about you, Gary? FSU, you obviously.
So FSU's rivalry, I suppose the big one is the Sunshine Showdown, and it's against Florida Gators, not the University of Miami. The Hurricanes, they've kind of come in and out and whatever else. That's not it. So Florida State is the rivalry, but it's not just the thing about FSU and Florida State and Florida is that it encompasses. They've cleverly done it, so it's a football rivalry that is now. And if you know about March Madness, they've also done it for all of the stuff. So there's softball and soccer and women's basketball and basketball. So the whole Florida State thing runs for the whole season, and they've kind of built it up as part of the Floridian type of thing. It has the football thing has been going since 1905 roughly, so it's been around. Florida massively ahead in the states. It's only been recently that FSU, since the late 70s, started to get a lot more, shall we say, competitive with it. But that's the main one. So yeah, that's the one. And like Sam was saying, our game is always played the Thursday after Thanksgiving, or the Saturday after the Thanksgiving week. So this week it's the last one in October. So
I'm gonna say I'm pretty sure it's always Thanksgiving weekend that Michigan play Ohio State. I'm pretty
it's
sure.
right. It's usually always it's called rivalry
Yeah.
weekend, and it is you'll pick up, as you'll say, you'll have Florida State, and probably Michigan Ohio State, and then on any of the other big ones that are out there, the big rivalries will be on that date, unless, as you say, Sam, you've been doing it for 124 years and you're not going to change it just because it fits with everybody else's schedule. Although
Yeah.
let's bear that in mind as we discuss forward planning. But yeah, that rivalry weekend is enormous in the States. It's, as you say, it's just after Thanksgiving. So it's a holiday weekend for pretty much the whole of the US. Everyone's back at home. And as we've talked about just before, home could mean Michigan flying back into, Ohio State. You could fly back in from California because you went to Florida State or you lived in Florida. Yeah. Everybody goes back home for that weekend. And everybody is there for then rivalry weekend. It's enormous.
So
yeah, I mean, there's obviously a thing with all three of our teams, and obviously the other teams that are out there. There's never just the one rivalry.
No,
there is multiple. I mean, obviously, again, you can with Texas. There's obviously Texas A&M. There's Texas Tech. They have a rivalry with Arkansas. They have a rivalry with TCU.
Yeah.
So there's sort of rivalries everywhere with all the different teams.
And we've got them within the ACC. Obviously, Clemson is a rivalry of ours just because they're pretty good. Some of the teams in the ACC aren't. Therefore, it's often rivalries like that within your conference. We do have a slight rivalry with Miami because you're in the same, state, and Tallahassee and Miami aren't that far apart. So therefore, there's the local rivalry, and that goes back to what you were saying, Fletch. A lot of these conferences are geographical because you used to go up against your neighbor in your neighboring town and your neighboring, city because you could only get there. Going back to what you said, these players and these athletes are students. So during the week, they're at class. So they can't go cross country to play on a Saturday. They could only, their conferences and geographical locations determined who they would play at the weekend because you could only really get from Ann Arbor to, down the road in a half a day to play on the Saturday and then back again for college on Monday. So that's a lot where the conferences and where a lot of those rivalries originate from. Obviously, as things have slightly moved around in conferences, you'll get some of the conference rivalries are now more about how competitive the teams have been But a lot of those older ones, like you've just mentioned, Sam, and the FSU one, 100 odd years, that's just due to the fact that they're just down the road and they're derby games, as we call them.
Yeah. So another couple of things you need to kind of look out for within college football, and these are things that we would all, I think these are things we already know. We all know the Heisman Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to kind of get past it, the Heisman Trophy is if you are familiar with the NFL, it's the equivalent of the NFL's MVP for the season. It's the best player in college, in the whole of college football that year.
It's the best
Now,
quarterback.
well, yeah, but you will know the last two winners will be familiar to you this year, as both of them are going to be more than likely top 3 picks in this year's draft, in Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, who won it this year. But some of the other previous winners from the last few years have been going back in Bryce Young, Devontae Smith, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. Yeah.
Derrick
Okay.
Henry.
Yeah. It was
Marcus
the
Mariota.
quarterback thing.
Derrick Henry was the last running back to win it, wasn't he?
Yeah. Derrick Henry, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Johnny Football, who we've just had a great conversation about the other day on Hurdle the Line.
Yep.
RG3, Cam Newton, Mark Ingram. Yeah. These are all names that we are very familiar with in the NFL world. One or two of them for reasons that they shouldn't be, but these are people that we know well within the world of football. And within the NFL, Derrick Henry is King Henry. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are known for the fact that they're going to be going very early in this year, very early on Thursday. Bryce Young, Devontae, again, yeah. These are
first round draft
pretty
picks.
important.
Inevitably, they are players who go first round in the NFL draft
Early
the
first
year
round
that
as well,
they
usually.
graduate. And I say that categorically because Caleb Williams won the Heisman last year, but did not choose to become eligible for the draft. He stayed in college and played for another year. And that might be around money and stuff that we'll talk about later. But
a lot of them do tend to go first pick. I mean, Bryce Young obviously went first pick. Kyler Murray went first pick. I think Joe Burrow was top 3, was he? I know he didn't go number 1 his year, I don't think.
He did.
He did go. Yeah, he did go number 1. I'm getting him mixed up with someone else.
Devontae Smith didn't go number 1 because he's a wide receiver. He'll always get bumped
Kyler
down.
Murray did. Baker Mayfield did. Lamar Jackson
didn't. But he was in a very strange year with some really good edge rushers, wasn't he, or something? I can't remember who went number 1 that year.
Marcus
number
Mariota
1 that year was Baker
second.
Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was number 1 that year.
Did Lamar win it in college and stayed in college and came out right?
Did what Caleb did. Similar to what Caleb Williams has just done. He won it a year ago, but stayed in college for another year. Marcus Mariota was second pick in that draft. But just as a really quick one,
because he was
Jameis Winston as well went first pick.
Yep.
And
just
then
as a quick one,
I've
got a really difficult question for you to answer. This is really hard trivia, so I want you to think really carefully about it. Can you guess which position has won the most Heisman trophies?
That's going to be a tough one.
Interior offensive line.
I think left tackle, wasn't it? Yeah. I think it's safe to say that, as we just mentioned, although it's nominally supposed to be an MVP, because of the way the college game is played, it's inevitably a QB who's on the list for Heisman Trophy. And I say that because if you've never watched and you're just getting into college and you're just watching the games for the first sort of time, it's not like the NFL. It's not like the pros where it's very set and very structured. College game is a lot more free, a lot more flexible, and the QBs tend to do a lot more with their legs, tend to be a lot more playmaker. The guy who's come out of high school who can play basketball and play baseball and run like the wind and do everything, that's usually who you end up having as a college QB. And it tends to be a lot more of a wildcat sort of formation offense of options and reads and QB runs and stuff like that. So it's a very different type of game, which is why inevitably your most important player even in the NFL, it's the most important player is your QB, but it's in such a different format and such a different measuring stick.
It's also why I think people, when we come on to when we're talking about drafts and that, the QB position is always the hardest to adjust to. I'm not saying that the others aren't hard, but the QB position is always inevitably seems to be the hardest position to adjust from college to the NFL, and that's why we see so many of these I suppose elite college players
Just
not necessarily making it in the NFL because it is a completely different style, a completely different way of playing. The reads you have to do and the speed
to be honest, one of the main things, and we can talk about this, and inevitably we will, but one of the main things that you play college football for 3 or 4 years, and depending on how long you stay there and how often you're a starter, you will take 95% of your college snaps from the shotgun position. In the NFL, it's completely the opposite. You'll take 95% under center, and most of these QBs who come out of college don't know the taking it from under center and the 3-step drop because they're playing from shotgun, and that's usually the bit that they're not used to turning their back on the defense, which is you have to do if you're taking it from under center 3-step drop. You turn your back on the defense. Half the time, most of these guys from college don't do that.
It's also just as I suppose a useful comparison for those that are potentially looking at with the draft and that. Caleb Williams last year had on average 6 seconds to make a throw. Now we know that in normal NFL football, you're lucky to get 3.
3, yeah.
So just to show you the difference between the style, the type of play, and the adjustment part is the fact that most of these quarterbacks are probably getting between 4, 6, 7 seconds to sit there to read the game, to see what they
Run
can
around
do
a bit,
with it,
do a little bit,
run around a bit. Whereas in the
and
NFL,
I suppose that's another thing. The NFL is different, and where the college game is very important to remember that everyone in the college game is all the same age.
Yes.
You're all, you come out of high school, and from a UK perspective, you're looking at 18 to 21, 19 to 23. You're in that sort of range. So all of the people you're playing against are in that age group and in that age range as well. You get to the NFL and then you're coming in at 23, 24, and you're playing against 27, 28, 29, 30, 31-year-olds who have been in the NFL professional athletes for 5, 6, 7 years. So are bigger, stronger, harder to run, do everything quicker. And that's a very interesting thing that most players and most people who watch the college game forget about. You don't get that sort of continuation.
One amazing stat I think I've seen a few times, but I first saw it on Last Chance U, was the whole X amount of players will play high school football every year. X amount of players will then get onto a college football team. X amount of them will actually play.
Yeah.
X amount of those will become eligible for the draft. X amount of those will be drafted. X amount of those will make it past the practice squad. You get to a handful of players from
the pyramid. It gets
millions.
It goes
with
really
all due respect to the college game. And when you imagine that defense is already more difficult because you are playing a reactive game, you are playing with thousands and thousands in your position across the country every week. A handful will make it to the NFL, and only a very small handful of those will make it past the practice squad and not bounce. With all due respect, a lot of these quarterbacks are throwing to NFL-ready wide receivers, depending on the school you go to. If you're going to an Alabama or a Georgia or a Michigan, your recruiting is so good that these are NFL-ready players, and a lot of these players will be going into the NFL and in the quite high picks. You are throwing to that wide receiver against a defensive back who, again, with all due respect, is selling car insurance next year. It's not the competition that they have, and it's why, for me, I hate some of these highlight reels that you get.
Don't watch tape from college.
Yeah, some of the teams that Michigan wins some of those games 70 plus points. They are not playing against players who will be in the NFL next year. They will be playing against people who in 10 years' time will be saying to their children, I played against him once.
Played against him. before I ended up in Wall Street, before I ended up doing a law, before I ended up doing this, that, and the other, I played against that guy. Yeah.
So
it's I was going to say it's also sort of useful to know is that a lot of players will play through college and won't have a position nailed on. Like you get people like there are a handful of people who will be playing wide receiver and cornerback. They'll also be playing. They might be playing tight end and running back, or they might they play completely like the amount of people that come out of college playing completely different positions to what they then end up playing in the NFL is just it can sometimes be quite maddening to see that. I mean, I know that there's a lot of talk with Cooper DeJean, as a college player people might know. Mm-hmm. He's a cornerback, but there's a highly likely situation where he could become a safety.
Yep, or a slot receiver.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's insane. But also going back to that pyramid thing you were talking about there, Fletch, about everybody plays high school football. The pyramid size is so vast at the bottom, and it shrinks so much as you go up through the levels that as you say, handfuls out of millions of kids who go and start playing. And what's weird, and it seems weird to a UK mindset, and I still find it weird, that once you get out of college, most US people stop playing sport. That's it. You go to college, you play in college, and then you stop. There's no adult sport that you can go down the park and kind of, there's pickup games as they're called, but there's no outside of college. And if you don't make it to the pros, there isn't. It seems like nobody else plays sport. You just kind of watch sport. Then it's
not like here. It's not like here where you have Sunday league, which is like just amateurs.
We love the game. We still want to play it. We're not that good. We haven't made it, but we'll still go out and find a team of like-minded players and players of the same sort of ability and play in a regulated, formulated way. It just doesn't happen in the US. You get there, if you make it to the pros or the minors or whatever else, that's great. But if you don't, that's it. Hang up your cleats and go and be a lawyer, or hang up your cleats and go and sell cars or car insurance, as you just said, Fletch. It's such a cut-off. It's bizarre.
I mean, that's the trope, isn't it? They're selling car insurance next year, and I know a lot of this is why
State Farm.
They say this on Last Chance Hugh. They say make them up. You got a scholarship to a university, make the most out of that education that you're gonna get for free. But going on to that, it's a nice little segue into how colleges get players. They recruit from high school. A term you will hear a lot is 5-star recruit. Now, we found out just before we went on what 5-star recruit. Well, we knew what a 5-star recruit was in general, but we only just found out where they get that from. So, a 5-star recruit is given to you by a few. There's a lot of independent scouts of high school football. Now, the amount of bad football that they must have to watch. It must not be an easy job to do, but they will scout the college and watch all high school football throughout the year to find the very, very best talents. Only a handful of those millions can get given a 5-star recruitment number. Those are considered the very, very best in the country at that position. And like I say, not very many are thrown out there. Very, very few players will ever get the chance to be a 5-star recruit. Then you obviously get 4-star, 3-star, 2-star. If you are brought in by a college as if someone's out there as a 5-star recruit, every college wants them. Every college wants a 5-star recruit.
Yep.
That 5-star recruit will go to will more than likely go to the NFL for you.
Injuries willing, etc. Absolutely,
yeah. They will be starting in their freshman year. They will be getting no matter what this person is, a guaranteed to play. Your 3-stars,
you might get redshirted. You might get
one term you'll have heard recently again is the walk-on. Is someone who doesn't have a scholarship, isn't a recruited. They walk on. They walk into college and they say, "Can I play?"
Yeah. They turn up for practice and go. They turn up for practice and go, "I want to have a go," and then the team go, "Whoa, this guy actually knows how to play. He's just." He's come. Usually, those are ones that have come more in the academic route.
Yeah,
and
but
people have
the reason
overlooked
we'd have
them.
heard it. quite a bit recently is because one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time has just retired from the NFL, who was a walk-on at college as a linebacker. So you talk about kind of some of the position changes as well within that. Jason Kelsey was a linebacker walk-on at college who just so happened to just get given a chance on the O-line and crushed it. But each college, the same way the NFL, every NFL team has scouts who go watch college games, who go to the combine, who go to various pro days and do interviews with players. Colleges do the same around high schools.
Mhm.
A lot of that, because of where you are and because of how vast the country is and how many high schools and how many kids can play football, you can't be everywhere all at once. A lot of colleges will focus their recruiting around the local area around. So Michigan will try and recruit around Michigan, around the state. Georgia will try and recruit around Georgia. Alabama, these quite common, but like I say, these 5-star recruits can come from all over the country, and they're the ones that you still want. But
And they're the ones that
am
get
I?
the.
I
They're
am
the
right
ones
on the
that get
Fana.
the. Yeah, they're the ones that get the incentivized offers, shall we say,
hmm
to come and play for college. Now, obviously, as we just mentioned, some of them will go and play for a college because dad played for that college and granddad played for that college or whatever. Some of them will go to, I want to go play for Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State because Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State have been at the top of the tree for the last X amount of years. And if you go and play there, you're in the public eye, you've got more chance of going to the NFL. Others, and as we go into maybe episode 2, because I'm just conscious that we are already going in, but others for episode 2 will go wherever the biggest NIL offer comes from, and that's going to change the landscape of the whole college football.
Or one thing we do have in college right now, and again, before we can get onto this another day, because I think we thought we'd fly through this and actually come up with some really good conversation about some of the things some of the other things. Some big names in college football. I spoke to you about this the other day, Sam. And one thing that college doesn't necessarily do very well is players becoming stars and players being stars. Other than throwback to Heisman winner Johnny Football, but for some
You
of
don't
them,
get those. You don't get those like superstar style players like you do get in the NFL with, the likes of,
Lamar,
without going into too many, but Patrick
Patrick
Mahomes,
Mahomes.
Lamar, etc., etc.
But the college football does have somewhat superstars. They have big names. They have big personalities. But they are your head coaches. They are
Tend to
your
be wearing
obviously
the headsets. Yep.
no longer there, but your Nick Sabans. Right now, your Deion Sanders, your Kalen DeBoers, your Jim Harbaughs, these are the big personalities that you find in college. And sometimes it's the opportunity to go play for that big personality as well, not just the NILs, but how
play
many
for that
kids
coach.
right now?
A number of the NFL coaches who haven't quite made it have gone back to college, haven't they? There's a few ex-NFL colleges that are in there. And there's big money in that. Big money for the coaches. Oof.
And again, you look at, like I say, Deion Sanders probably being the biggest one right now. How many kids would have grown up watching Deion Sanders, and or their dad grew up watching Deion Sanders, and all of a sudden it's like, Dad, Deion, I've had an offer from Colorado, and we'll go play under Deion Sanders. Go.
Yeah.
And that's, as I say, that's going to change things. The coaching, as you mentioned, but also Deion being Deion will bring in a level of revenue stream that maybe Colorado Buffaloes wouldn't have had in the last 10 years. And so they can go and recruit a little more aggressively. So interesting times in college football. We've barely even got a chance to touch on it. Right at the beginning, we talk about the Power Five. Well, then we went off on a whole tangent. We haven't even mentioned the fact that the Power Five is really only now the Power Four, because the Pac-12 has been decimated. Teams have you've got to try and remember now. So there were 12 teams in the Pac-12. I think there are still now only two teams remaining. Oregon State, Washington State, who have not found a new conference to go and join. Stanford and UC UC Berkeley went to the ACC, I think.
Hang
Yeah,
on, I will
went to
get
the
this up now.
ACC.
I had this up before. I
So
will get
yeah,
this
you've
up now.
got Berkeley and
UC
Stanford went to
Berkeley.
ACC.
Washington, Oregon went to the
University of
UCLA.
California and
UCLA and
Southern
USC. Yeah.
California.
So UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon went to
Big Ten.
Big 10,
Big Ten.
Big 16 or whatever it's called now, which left here we go.
Arizona,
Arizona.
University of Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, University of Colorado, and University of Utah all went to what is now is now the Big 12, but there's about 20 teams in there.
Big
Something
18.
ridiculous now.
So it was the Big 12 because it was 12 big schools. Now it's just a big number because it's a big number of teams.
A big number of teams in there. Yeah.
And now you're looking at less than a Power 5, but more of a Power 2, where the SEC are taking all these teams and the Big 10 are taking all the big teams, and you're leaving your ACCs and your Big 12s.
Almost a second division, it's almost getting to that sort of two-tiered where there'd almost have to be a Division 1 AA, but there already is a Division 1 AA. It's like they're almost going to have to find a different tiering system. And the downside of that, and as we're all aware of as NFL and American fans, relegation and promotion doesn't exist in American sports.
No.
So once you're in that conference, and if that conference becomes lessened, you're kind of stuck as a university and as a college, unless you can then negotiate your way out of. And a lot of these conferences are tied to media streams and revenue streams, and that's one of the big issues that's currently bubbling around in the college game at the moment as well.
So
yeah, I mean that's what I mean. Arguably, one of the reasons why Oklahoma and Texas moved to SEC was because, I mean, you look at some of the games that are now going to come out of that. I mean, they can play the likes of Texas A&M, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU. It's just the games and the money streams and the sales that have come off of those big games is the reason behind the decisions that they make.
It's why it's the whole point. It's the whole reasoning or the whole thing behind the Pac-12, because the Pac-12, sorry, I'm going to get teachery and maybe telling everyone to suck eggs what's going on here, but the Pac-12 were unable to get a decent contract with one of the big broadcasting networks. So they had, I think it was 2020, their previous one ran out, and they were like, right, let's have a look, let's sign up the next one and see where we can go. And they couldn't get one because most of the big sort of networks were like, you're not a great conference. You've got a few good teams, but it's not TV worthy. Some of the games are a bit, as we mentioned, Fletch, some of the games ended up being 80-0 and, massive blowouts. So they didn't manage to find a decent enough contract with a network that would provide the schools with the kind of money that the other shiny conferences, and all they had to do is look across and go, hang on, those guys are getting $1.2 billion a season to play on ESPN or whatever else. And therefore they went, well, we have an out now. The conference has given us an out because you haven't signed a new contract. We're off over there. And that's the importance of the media, and that's the importance of these contracts, these universities, because you just feel for the, and we mentioned it just off air before we kind of jumped on here, Oregon State and Washington State, all of those guys who've got scholarships, all of those guys have gone to those universities to do well and play, are suddenly looking at it going, well, we play each other, one game a season and that's it. They're all transferring out now because they need to go find conferences that, games that are competitive.
And you think, scouts are not going to watch the fourth installment of Oregon State versus Washington State this season. They're not doing
this month.
And you think as much as we want college players to be going and getting the best out of their education and getting the most out of life and preparing themselves for the future, because they may not make it to the NFL. The end goal of going and playing football at college is to make it in the NFL. why are you going to want to be somewhere that will never give you that opportunity to go play, or where it will seriously hinder your opportunity to get into the NFL because no scouts are watching you or looking at you. But guys, I actually conscious of the time that we're on, and it's been a brilliant conversation, and I think actually it'd be nice to actually get a serious conversation in about this next bit next week.
I think
I really appreciate it.
I think it probably has to be the week after, though, Fletch.
Yes, it might have to be. So
because there's a big thing going on next week.
Every time we've said, we'll mention that later on in the episode. We'll move on to that. See you in 2 weeks on them. So this is where college football's at. But to kind of wrap it up, though, this is where college football's been, and this is the game that a lot of us have kind of come to know. But we need to ask ourselves what college football is going to look like tomorrow, in tomorrow's world of sports, when we're talking about TV deals and we're talking about what certain colleges have done and certain courts have said about what colleges have done. Things are changing in college. We don't know what college football looks like right now. Nobody knows what college football looks like right now. There are lots of major changes happening, and what we're going to do is, in a couple of weeks, we'll have a look at some of those changes, see, and then we'll ask ourselves, kind of what does this mean for college football going forward? But for today, if you are brand new to college football, if this is something that is a concept that's relatively new to you, we hope we've been able to help you at least a little bit get familiar with the concept. If not, then I am very sorry. We've probably just bored you to death with information that you already knew. But I hope that we've done it in a way that was delightful. So, which I've enjoyed this conversation. So,
I think this conversation has just showed what I hoped this would be: is three of us talking about what we love, what we're passionate about, and learning things as we go. Some of the dates that we've learned, some of the the history about the Texas rivalry. I wasn't as au fait with that. I knew there was a rivalry, but I didn't know it went back to 1900, and it's been 125-year anniversary next year. All of this kind of nuanced stuff is great, and the fact that it's taken us, and apologies that we've kind of gone a little bit off schedule there, Fletch, but we've gone off on tangents and had conversations about salient points, but we're still not even really touched and scratched the surface of some of those bigger things that we need to talk about.
And all of this is going to come. All of that to come. So, one more time, thank you very, very much for listening to the College Football UK podcast, where brought to you by the Asleep at Work Network. And if you are free on Thursday, the 24th of April, is the 24th, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the one. At 11:30 at night GMT, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, and figure it out for yourself if you're in a slightly different time zone. Feel free to join us on Twitter. That would be the AAW_network on Twitter. And we will start actually posting on our Twitter and Instagram for this podcast, which is Twitter is CFB_UK. And Instagram is switchround UK_CFB. The links will be in the description to this episode. Also, with where you can follow myself and these two wonderful, handsome gentlemen.
Say that handsome, but if you're listening on Spotify or Podbeam, then you can say that we're handsome. If you have the misfortune of seeing any video, then you might disagree with that.
So, but it goes without saying, but thank you so very much, gentlemen, and have a lovely week, and I hope to see you throughout the week. If not, I will see you next week. I know I'll see you, Sam, this week.
Yeah, we'll be talking. We always seem to. I think there's 500 messages in the chat.